information. I'm John Spader from Spader Business Management and president of Spader Business Management. And I just wanted to start with a little bit of history. Quite often, folks that are on these webinars do not know a lot about Spader or are new to Spader. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with a little bit of overview on our company. There's a picture of my father, Dwayne Spader, there, who started Spader Business Management with an RV dealership in the early 1960s, which he had up until just a few years ago, as when he sold that off when he retired. So until a few years ago, we've had our own RV business, and actually up until the end of August, my brother Tony was still running the dealership for the new owner, and my brother Tony will be joining us on this end of our business in the near future here as well. I'm not going to read through every one of these, but my father learned a lot of systems from some of his mentors. And we did start 20 groups in 1976, so we're celebrating our 40th year in 20 groups as well. And held our first total management of this workshop was held in 1980. Our company currently has a little over 40 full-time employees, and we work in several different industries. We conduct 20 groups. And for those of you not familiar with 20 groups, that's where up to 20. Most of them have got somewhere between 8 and 14 or 15 non-competing dealers get together. They send us their financials monthly, and I'm going to show you some of that aggregate data here in just a little bit. They send us their financials monthly, and then we facilitate 3 meetings a year and visit their sites as well. So when I'm talking about saying most dealers are doing this or most dealers are doing that, just want to let you know this comes from gathering hundreds of financial statements from the different industries that are on the webinar today. We gather those monthly, aggregate them, then put them into an average top 20, bottom 20. And so it tells us if there's any trends changing. You see them very, very quickly there. Our current client list over the past little over 10 years now includes over 7,000 different businesses that we've worked with in some way, shape, or form in 10 plus industries. And we do work with businesses in all sizes, from 5 to 8 person employee dealerships that are doing a couple of million and a half, 2 million, to we've got some clients now that have crossed over $1 billion in business. And we work with lots of dealers in all size ranges there. And so we do bring a multi-industry perspective and unparalleled experience. Real quick, our vision, mission, and values. I'm just going to put these on and let you read through them on your own. So when you're working with Spader, this is the environment that we ask you to hold us accountable to, and that we strive to meet when we are working with you. Just a little bit more on myself. I worked in our dealership full time before at the end of 1989 I joined SBM as a sales trainer to start with, and then have worked through a lot of the different positions, and then took over as president in 2001. I've been facilitating 20 groups for, it's actually in another year or so, be almost 30 years currently, and have been teaching our Total Management 1 workshop for 25 plus years now as well. Well, today's objectives of our session is we want to explain some of the practical details of the Total Management workshop. We want to introduce some of the concepts of the course at a high level to give you a good feel of what you would receive if you participated. Cover some of the benefits of attending and answer any questions or concerns that you may have. At the end of the session, I will ask Pete to go ahead and put up a chat box where you can type in any questions that you may have, as well as feel free to email or call our 800 number at any time as well. So let's go ahead and just jump right into the content here of the Total Management workshop. I'd like to start with a quote that comes from my father. Small business people and numbers seem to be in conflict. In working with myself now for almost 30 years, in working with literally thousands of small business people, I wholeheartedly agree with the quote that my father gave that most small business people really struggle to get a handle on their numbers. Now, many of them actually know them and can manage them themselves, but struggle to explain it to others. And so, a big part of what Total Management One is, it's really how to demystify the financials for the average person. I work with hundreds of dealers every year that just struggle and say, what are my P&Ls telling me? What are the financials telling me? What should I do? Where are we good? Where are we bad? And then in many cases, just don't even have benchmarks. Numbers are meaningless unless compared to something. So what should they be? What are the good benchmarks for the different numbers? And a big part of this also is how do we use the numbers to get employees to think and act like owners, and really get them to see the same thing as the owners see. In the format of the workshop, it is built around a case study dealership that has the issues that most dealers face on a day-to-day basis built right into it. So we go through, and let me just go give a sample of that real quick. If we look at this, here is one of the case study dealerships that we look at in the workshop. And as we look at this, you can see that we're doing about 8.7 million in business here, 2.1 million, or about a 25% company gross profit or gross margin, and this dealership's only keeping 2 to 3%. Now, the minimum that we believe dealerships should keep on average is 3 to 4% of sales. And at that level, we don't even call it profit. We call it survival net. At 3 to 4% of sales or less, and that's keeping 3 to 4% after the owners paid themselves fair market rent for the facilities, and after they paid themselves a fair wage if they're working in the business. And at 3 to 4% pre-tax, a dealership's still going to struggle with cash flow and really making it work. So that's the minimum that we keep. Now, when you look at this case study dealership, we're only keeping 2.3% of sales here, 205,000 on 8.7 million in sales. And in the workshop, that's where we'll go through. And in many of our case studies in the workshops, we'll take time and ask people, where are the problems? In this dealership, then, we're not keeping a decent net, so where are the issues and where are the problems? And what I can share with you is there will be a lot of different things. Sometimes we'll fill 3 or 4 different flip charts, and what one person says is a problem, the next one argues is an okay number. And what another person says is a bad number, the other one will say is okay number. So we get lots of opinions. And I bring this up as an example of when we look at the P&L, what happens when we don't have a clear set of ratios or guidelines that everybody can buy into. We get lots of opinions, and then what happens? The owner or the general manager ends up just getting frustrated, pulling their hair out, throwing the P&L on the shelf, and just telling everybody, go work harder, sell more, and it'll be okay. But the problem is next year we may do that, and then instead of 8.7, we do 10 million. We're still not keeping survival net. And we just keep working harder, selling more, and never make the money that we deserve. So one of the things that we introduce, and I'm going to show you some examples of what we're talking about here in a little bit, but is the concept of the score versus statistics. There's a lot of good data on this financial here. There's a lot of very good data, but there's a big difference when you've got a dashboard that is like a basketball scoreboard. Now, when we put this scoreboard up and it says 88 to 76, everybody comes to the same conclusion instantly. And that's the big difference between a score and a statistic. Most dealers are buried in statistics and giving their people a lot of statistics, but in all of those statistics, the score is hidden. Think of a basketball game. If you had 15 boards of statistics on the wall, but you didn't have the scoreboard that said 88 to 76, but had percentage of free throws, percentage of shots made, percentages of steals, etc., etc. The score is hidden in there, but everybody think we're at a different score, and some just wouldn't care about the score. They just say, I'm going to go to work, get my paycheck, and away we go, because I really don't understand the numbers and can't figure the score out anyway. And if you did that, some are going to think we're way ahead, some think we're way behind. We spend most of our time and energy arguing about what the score is. Versus if we got a scoreboard and it says 8876, we're very, very clear right there. And without proper scorekeeping in the dealership, what happens? Effective goal setting is almost impossible. The business mainly reactive versus proactive to the market. The true capacity, the people involved is never really reached because we never get everyone focused on that and pushing on the exact same number. Because unless we get a true score, you don't get that full buy-in that we need. And the business quite often tends to careen between extremes if we don't have a true score and a true system. Now, there's another concept that has held true over the years, and that is also that beyond 3 to 4 numbers at a time, most people cannot process or correlate. So when we start giving financials and we got pages and pages of numbers, or even on one page where we've got dozens or hundreds of different numbers, it gets very, very hard to correlate. So what we've created and have been using in our own business for over 45 years now is we've created a system that starts with the total company, where we look at the total company and you look at no more than 3 to 4 numbers. In a little bit, I'm going to tell you if I could only have one number to judge your whole business by. I'm going to share what that number is here in a little bit. If I could only have 2 numbers to judge your whole business by, what would those 2 numbers be? And it's interesting, if you give me those 2 numbers, in most cases it'll tell us just about exactly where you're at, whether you're in the survive, stabilize, thrive, or maximize mode in many cases. So part of the week that we get in is where are those 3 to 4 numbers that we start with? First with the total company, and then if there's issues there, what are the 3 to 4 in the sales? What are the 3 to 4 in service? And if it's the problem is in people expenses in the sales department, what's the 3 to 4 key ratios there? So that we start big picture and never looking at more than 3 to 4 numbers at a time or less. We can start for the big picture and then get down into all of the line item details. And we do this in a way for non-numbers oriented and non-accounting type people as well. The total system just eliminates, when you get that, eliminates that constant crisis management, or as one dealer said, I don't feel like I'm playing whack-a-mole anymore, John. Once I got the whole system, me and my managers could drill down, and we just got rid of the whack-a-mole game, was his direct quote with that. Now, let's go ahead and get into the components of the workshop. We're going to cover some of the key components at a high level. One of the first ones is just some key business principles. And we've got a set of general business principles that when you get to look inside several thousand businesses every year and you get their monthly financials and you meet with them 3 times a year, which we do with our 20 groups, and you get to see things that are working in every industry or not working in every industry. And when you've got them, the aggregate data like we have, and we're going to cover here in just a little bit, you just see things that just jump to the surface with you with that. And one of the first things is key expense ratios. And I'm going to share with you a set of ratios and how we look at the financials and manage expenses. We don't manage expenses as looking as a percentage of sales like traditional accounting does. We can look at it that way as well. We look at it both ways, but we take a look at managing 100% expenses as a percent of the gross profit. So if you think of it, whether your company margin is 5% or whether it's 55% of the dealership margin, what's the one thing that every dealership has in common, and it is common for you year after year, even when your sales mix and margins change? So you got 100% of the gross profit dollars to spend, and that's it. So we measure expenses as a percentage of gross profit. And I'm going to show you in the aggregate data in the different industries on the call today what that looks like here in actuality. This is a blended set of ratios from all of the industries that we have. When you come to the workshop, you get your specific industry ratios for the total company, for the departments, and for every line item in the dealership with that. So what these ratios do then, and everybody, it's one of those scorecards that everybody understands. No longer are we going to manage hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in gross profit and sales, we're going to manage a dollar. We're going to take that 100% of gross profit, convert it to what we call the $1 concept. So of every dollar, if you're doing good, we're only spending 39 cents on people costs. Yellow is 44 and red is 49. And you can see if we go to the high end of all of our ratios, we spent 100% of our gross profit, or for every dollar we brought in, we spent a dollar. We don't have a business now. This is what we call a hobby when we're not making any money at it. When you look at the yellow, on average, if we spend 84 cents of every gross profit dollar we come in, that means we're keeping 16 cents of every gross profit. That'll equate to 3 to 4% of sales for most dealerships, and that is only that survival net. High performers will be keeping 30% plus of every gross profit dollar. So in the workshop, you can see we've got three numbers. We've got personnel expense, variable, and fixed. And if you want to add total expenses, there's our 3 to 4 numbers that we look at. And just as an example of how we break down in the system, if our variable is high, we break variable down to three things: our advertising, our floor plan interest, and our other variable. And then if floor plan is high, we can break that down. Is it new? Is it used? Is it brand A, brand B, brand C, or product category A, B, or C, or whatever it may be there? So we show you how to do that in the workshop, and we've got the benchmarks for each of these. And one of the things is I'll show you examples a little bit. You can send your data in ahead of time, but if you've got any one of your categories that are at or above the red range in your industry, red bells and warning lights ought to be going off all over. Because what you find is when you start getting one of these categories at or above the red, it gets hard to cut the others back enough to keep a good net profit. For instance, you'll notice if we go to the high end on people and we go to 49 on people, even if we cut everything else back to the low end, it gets very hard to keep anything over survival net. So that's how these different ranges work. Now, let's just take a quick stroll through the industries, several of the industries on the phone. We may not be hit them all, but would like to take a quick look at how this shakes out. Now, this happens to be marine dealers up on 10 million up to or under $10 million marine dealers in 2017, September of 2017. So the average now on all of these categories we're going to go in, we've got the average, then we've got the 20% most profitable dealers, and we've got the 20% least profitable dealers. So the average dealer through September is making 7.6% of sales, or keeping 29 cents of every gross profit dollar. High performers are keeping almost 12% of sales, or 44 cents of every gross profit dollar. And you can see the low performers are just keeping survival net at about 3% of sales, or about 14 cents of every gross profit dollar. Notice the personnel ratios as we go through here. On that people, 32, 39.8, 44.4. Now, this is through September. They're going to give some of that back in October, November, December, because boat dealers generally lose some pretty serious money those months. But if we take a look at September 2016, you can see they ended, and the dealers, they're probably going to end about the same, where somewhere around 9 to 10% net. But you can see the high performers here kept 8.5%, average were 4.5%, and the low performers kept 1.2. Now notice once again personnel ratios, and I'm pointing them out here, but in every dollar volume category in every industry we look at, you're going to see the same thing. So we spent 38% on people, the high performers did. That's in that 39 category we talked about. And the low performers spent that 49 cents. You can see the low performers are about at a break even in 2016. Okay, let's take a quick look at boat dealers 10 million plus. This is September 2017. With the average dealers making 12% of sales, the high performers are 12, the average are 7, and low performers are at 5.1. When we look at December 2016, we get a full year, the 12 months, we can see the high performers made 9%, average was about 4.7, and the least profitable broke even with that. And look at this, they're doing almost 19 million in business. And a minute ago we saw dealers doing 7 million that were making 700,000, and now we got dealers doing 19 million that are only making $163,000. So volume does not always equal profit. Just because you sell more doesn't mean you make more. If you're doing it right, when you sell more, you'll make more. But I just want to point that out. If we take a look at RV dealers, let's take a look at RV dealers September 2017. And RV dealers under 10 million, average dealers at 7.4, high performers are almost 12% of sales, and the low performers are at 3.8. When we hit year end of 2016, the average dealers kept about 4, high performers kept a little shy of 9% of sales. Now this is the 20%, so some of them probably kept 10% and some of them kept 8%. And the least profitable dealers, you'll notice, actually lost money. For every dollar in gross profit they brought in, they spent $1.08. Here's RV dealers 10 to 35 million in September, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly now because it's really the same thing all the way through. Because once again, you'll notice high performers are what? Spending 40 cents on people. Low performers are spending 50 cents on people, and you can see that all the way through. So I'm going to go through these numbers fairly quick just so everybody can take a snapshot of their own industry. And then make a couple of points on them on the end before we move on to the other content. So here's RV dealers December 2016. And you can see high performers 9, average at 5.3, low performers at 1.6. 35 million plus RV dealers September 2017. And you'll note that the high performers seem to be in that 8 to 10% net. Doesn't matter what industry, what dollar volume, we see it time and time again. There's 2016 when they ended. High performers averaged about 8%. Low performers were in that 3%. Here's farm equipment dealers. Now we'll notice quite a difference in farm between smaller dealers and larger volume dealers. So you see the operating profit there, 9%, 4.5%, and 1%. Last year we had 8.5% for high, 3.5% for average, and low performers actually lost. They spent you'll notice $1.09. Notice what happened with personnel here. The high performers spent a little less than 38 cents on people. The low performers spent 66 cents on people. And there's the 25 to $75 million farm equipment dealers. We got 7.3, 2.6, and a negative 1.7 net. That's year to date. Farm equipment's going through the tough times like the marine RV and power sports did in 2008, 9, 10. That's what the farm equipment industry is going through right now. There's what they did 2016. If we look at large farm equipment dealers, 75 million plus, you'll notice that they still haven't made the adjustments in the haven't adapted like the other dealers have. And because a lot of these are going to be big multi-store 10, 12, 15, 20 location plus dealerships, and turning that aircraft carrier is a whole lot harder than turning a store, 2, 3, 4 stores. So you can see they're only, the average is about 4% there. High performers are about 4, average is about 1. Low performers have spent $1.17 for every dollar in gross that they brought in. And it's getting better. You can see last year was worse. December 2016 was worse. We take a quick look at power sports and then a couple key points I want to share there. You can see once again in the power sports, this is up to $8 million dealers. As we're looking at the under 8 million. This September 2017. There it is in 16. Okay, $8 to $13 million dealers in September of 2017. High performers are at a little over 6, about 6.5. Average is at 3. Low performers are about break even, and that's pretty close to the same numbers, just a little bit less than 16. So 17's looking a little bit better for power sports dealers on the whole. And as we look at one key point that I want to point out here, and this is one of the things that we really get into in the workshop, is how some of the models are changing. Now, please note that this is 12 months worth of data, and note that the high performing dealers at a 6% net versus low performers at a minus 1.1, so that's 7.1% difference of sales. And the high performers are actually lower margin by almost a point when you look at their company margins. Now, their sales department margins are a little bit higher, but when you look at their company margin when you package it all together is actually about a point lower. And you're starting to see that happen in some industries, that the highest net profit dealers sometimes are lower, not the lowest margin, but they're lower margins than some of the others. And the models are really starting to change, and many dealers have not caught on to that and are really understood and made the adjustments. So that's going to be one of the key things that we talk about and we take a look at in the workshops. And the other key point I want to make is that in many cases, these higher performers, the top 20% dealers, also have the highest paid people. Not only do they have the highest net profits, but they've got the lowest personnel ratio, but they've got the highest paid people. Now, how can they do that? And this is one of the things that we cover in the workshop of how do you structure your business, and how many people do you need in certain spots. And if I only get one number to judge, this is that one number. If I only have one number to help you manage, to judge and benchmark, and to help you manage your whole dealership by, this is the one number that I would want. And it's the gross profit, what we call available income, or gross profit, same thing, per employee. And this is per full-time equivalent. So if you got somebody that works a quarter of the time, you would count them as a quarter employee with that. So pretty average in many of the industries that are on the phone today is we'll see $100,000 in gross profit per employee. And if we spend that personnel ratio we talked about, if we spend 50% on personnel, that means we could pay that'd be $50,000 per employee. When we take the benefits, the Social Security, the health insurance, 401k, workers' comp, all that stuff, uniforms, goes to $8,000. That means we could pay them $41,000 in direct wages. We'd have $8,000 in benefits for $50,000, and the dealership's only got $50,000 left to pay all of its bills. Now, what if we can get that number up to $125,000, and where our expense ratio goes down to 47? You can see now all of a sudden, look at that, we can pay the average person $7,000 more. That's not quite 20%. That's on 20% of 41,000 would be 8,200. So it's not quite, but that's 16-17% more money, and the dealership, and the ratio is lower, and the dealership's got another 16,000 to pay its bills and hopefully keep a net profit with that. And at 150,000, if our ratio goes down to 45, you can see, look at that, from 100 to 150,000, our ratio drops 5 points. The dealership's got another 32,000 to pay its bills, and we're paying another 15,000 per employee. Paying another 15,000 per employee. 35, 40, roughly 40%, 35 to 40% more. And when you get to the really high performers, you can see what happens with the numbers. So very, very common that those with the lowest expense ratio have the highest paid people and the biggest nets. So how do we get there? That's a big part of what we get into in the class. And how are those high performers doing that? And what's that model? As I shared earlier, there's really getting to be 3 or 4 models that are coming out that if you're not in one of those, it can be very, very hard to do business in today's market with that. Now, if we take a look at power sports at 13 million plus, just to wrap that up real quick, and I wanted to go through there because I'm going to show you there's a little different model. You'll notice when we looked at the $8 to $13 million dealers in the top 20%ers, we saw the unit margins in that about the same. And we saw the company margins about the same. Now, when we go same industry, just a different dollar volume category, take a look at the high performers are almost 15 points on units. They're 11 and a half, so there's a 3-point difference on unit margins. And when we look at company margin, there's about a 2.5 points higher in company margin with that. And we've got about that same 6-point spread between the high and the low. So I bring those points up just to share there's different models, and that's a lot of what we explore in the workshop, looking at those different models. And in those different models, then there's big keys in how you start your philosophy and your strategy from the total company, and then what are we doing in sales, service, parts, and F&I as we go. One of the other, so key expense ratios is one of the key components. We've got several formulas that we use for how do you shortcut to improve your judgment, and then systems and attitudes needed for a stable, successful business. How do you get more margin than your competitor? Or if you're one of those other models, what's the attitude that you need to use in that model? If it's not focused on margin, what is it focused on? And that's where we go through several examples and we role play that stuff during the week. And one example when we talk about the right attitudes is of every dollar, how much does the average employee believe the owner is keeping in the bank at the end of the year? When you ask the head of employees, and that's something you can do if you've never done, is just tear up a bunch of blank pieces of paper, ask every employee of every dollar that goes through the business, how much you think the owner keeps in the bank at the end of the year. Very common that you'll get 15, 20, 25, 30 cents of every dollar. So let's go back to that attitude. If your employees are really believing you're keeping 10, 20, 30 cents of every dollar, and the customer says, I can buy it on the internet cheaper, and the employee's thinking, I can't even get $1 an hour raise, what's their attitude in holding margin and really selling margin and holding margin when they're selling to the customers? So we address how do we get the right scorecard, back to that scorecard again, so everybody sees the score and we're not looking at lots of statistics. Because if they're truly believing you're making that kind of money, I mean, they're going to operate way different than if they know what the true score is. One of the other components is the business plateaus and org structures. How do we organize ourselves in those different models to get that high gross profit dollars per employee? And we have maps. We'll show you how do we grow and shrink position by position, department by department. How do I know when I should add a position, when I shouldn't add? How do I know when to stop growing? Sometimes growing another 15% is the worst thing you can do. And we go through case studies of that. That's a mistake a lot of us make, is we'll get that take that extra 10 or 15% volume, because what I can share with you is if you're in the top of a plateau, if you're up here making those 6 to 10% nets and you're going to take that jump to go to the middle of the next plateau, you quite often need a minimum of that 15, 20, or minimum of 15 to 20%, maybe even 30% increase, just to keep reasonable nets to make it worthwhile. And if you're in a market where you got to shrink, sometimes shrinking some is the best thing you can do to get your stability back. So we show department by department how to grow a business and how to shrink a business position by position. Now, whether you're multi-store or whether you're single, whether you're a 5-person single store, these maps work. And whether you're a 50-store, billion-dollar business spread across the country, the maps work either way. So we show how to grow it up and shrink it down, because the core principles are the same there. And here's an example of where we just start with one of the smaller dealerships, and we just start with which positions do we add and how do we add, and then how do we recommend paying with each, and we've got those expense ratios for each position as we go through the case study as well. One of the other components is how to understand and work with the 4 basic styles. And just to have a little bit of fun, this is the people management side that we cover. We give an assessment so we understand what our personal style is, and then how to recognize and interact with the other styles, such as how do we interact with the dominant director. This is a good cartoon with there. My job is to make decisions. Your job is to make them good decisions. That's the way the high D makes things operate. The high I, or interacting socializer. Yes, sir, I have my staff working hard on the Quigley project right now. High I's idea of work is having fun. A little humor with the steady relators, or the high S's. Jane, we appreciate your efforts to make the most of our company's resources, but it's time for an upgrade. Okay, if that's what the company wants. Us high S's, we make money by saving money. The high D's and I's are going to make money they're just going to try and sell their way out of it, and they believe in sell more. Us S's, we're going to make our money by saving our way to profitability. And then we got the high C's, or the cautious thinkers. I like your determination to make this project work. They'll have all kinds of plans and want to play it out on paper, and really be very, very conservative with taking risk with that. So we go through what are the 4 basic styles. How do we work with them? How does that play out in the dealership? We're always role playing the different dynamics of what goes on in the dealership between sales and service, and of which I'm sure in your dealerships there is no friction there, but we've heard there is a little friction sometimes between sales and service. So how does that all play out, and how do we get that focus so that it's a positive, not a negative? One of the other components that we cover is a proprietary pricing system that really gets the employees together and focused, and understand and buy into what margin do we need to be competitive in the marketplace. And depending on that can change significantly depending on what model that we pick. And if you're not in one of those models right now, and I just see too many dealers that are struggling with that, and if not clearly defined your own model, and it can change depending on what your competition is and your product lines. And I'm going to bring up one power sports, a couple that had a dealership where they had a big multi-store come in and buy stores around them, and they got very concerned they were going to get put out of business. And that's been about 3 years ago. We sat down with them, we helped them pick their model, and it actually turned out to be a very good thing to have that high level competition, because it made them choose their model with that, and they've done better than they ever dreamed that they could do the last 3 years, and are just thriving even with the raise in competition. So in every market there's different models, and in one market you may want, the same dealer would choose one model in one market but a different one depending on products and competition in the other markets. So just make sure that you get clear and don't start blending them and get yourself in trouble like lots of dealers are. But we've got a pricing system that really identifies for each employee, and then we also tie pay plans to those as well. And then when it comes to budgeting and forward forecasting, one of the key things we do is a profit plan, and we've got multiple levels of this. We've got 3 levels. We've got one that I ask at the end of every workshop. We show the dealers how to do it that attend. And I ask, and probably 80 to 90% of them agree with me. I say, if you do nothing other than this 30-minute profit plan that I had here, and in 30 minutes you can do your annual goal and spread it by the month, including inventory levels that you needed. And you also get the software tool to do that is included with. And every 80 to 90% of the dealers agree that if they do that goal and spend 30 minutes, they'll have a better plan they've ever had before. And many of them have been in business 20, 30 years when they come to the workshop. So I know it works. We've done it with hundreds. And then there's 3 levels of implementation. You can start with the 30-minute. We got one that's a little more of a level. And then we've got the detailed department by department, line item by line item. But whichever level works best for you. And then here's a good example of just a one page. When I talk about this, isn't that 30-minute profit plan. This is even a more basic one, but where we take the ratios and we can just plug it in, and we can do a real quick profit plan just to see where we're at. So that's one of the most basic ones that we have. Then one of the most important things and unique things that we offer is our forward forecasting. Way back in April and May, for most dealers, we can accurately forecast where their year is headed and whether they're on track for the year or not. We've been doing this for 30 plus years, and I've won a lot of free drinks. I can tell you that. When people say, you can't tell me in April, May where I'm going to be year end, and I'll say, give me your last 3 years, April or May financial. Let me pour it into the forecasting system and then hand it back. And they're just shocked at how close that we can come time after time. So one of the things we also show is how do we do our budget. Once we've got our monthly budgets, even if it's the 30-minute version, well, that we've got the spread by the month, we plug the actuals in, what's our deviation look like, where we're at, but most important, where are we headed? And this is one of an actual dealer on the forward forecasting system, one of our online tools that we use. The line with the stars is last year's actual sales. The black line with the diamonds is the budgeted, and then the solid red line with the squares up to the dotted lines is this year's actual. So we're at the end of May with this dealer, and when we hit 35 to 40% seasonal trend, this dealer's at 40, is where this forecasting system becomes highly accurate. So for this dealer, you can see way back in May they budgeted 11.5 million, and they're tracking 10.5 million, unless something changes significantly. On their gross profit dollars, they're tracking a little bit less than what they budgeted and last year. Now expenses, they're dead on. So if they don't change anything, instead of $515,000, they're headed for $196,000 net. But the nice part is we can do a timeout and we can change some things. That's why we do this. So it's time for this dealer to do a major timeout if they want to hang on to a good net profit yet. One of the other components, just a couple others here as we wrap up. One of the other components is our key inventory management. And once again, we've got 3 implementation levels with inventory, and we've got a 20 to 30 minute plan that I just gave a workshop a couple of weeks ago, and several of the dealers came up to me after and says, John, I can't believe it. And they'd already after lunch break had done their own inventory plan and said, I can't believe how clear this makes it and helps me with my ordering. So works very, very well. Now, we don't want you to stop with the 20 to 30 minute, but even if you do just that, and then how to create a plan for turnover and a good month supply, and how do you set your inventory ranges? Where should you red flag? What's the absolute highest you should ever go to? And that varies month by month, depending on your trends, etc. And we share with you very simple, quick formulas of how to make that decision. And it differs by manufacturer, and especially in today's world, in some industries where the lead times have gone out a long ways, or if it's one of those where you don't even hang the phone up from the ordering the unit and it's already on the lot. I mean, those can change. You need to have adaptability in your system. So how do we change our system depending on that environment? And this is just an example of some of the quick formulas and one of the first pages of the inventory management worksheets and packets that we go through. Pay plans, we get into pay plans for all of the different positions and how do you set up. And while we give you a set of written pay plans that are each in a booklet format for the different positions, we also, in today's world, I will tell as many dealers not to go on our pay plans as I will tell to go on our pay plans, depending on how they answer a series of questions. What we find is that most don't ask the key questions before designing their pay plans. And so that's part of what we do in class is we identify what are those key questions, and depending on how you answer the questions, with that, the pay plan that comes out the other end may be very similar to what we recommend and have in writing, or may be significantly different, and that's okay either way. And a lot of your pay plan can depend on where your dealership, if you're a dealership trying to maximize versus you're in survival mode. And so we talk about all of those things as we go through the workshop. Another key component in today's world is cash flows. And as one dealer said, John, trying to get a handle on cash flow, he said, I feel like it's like trying to pin Jello to the wall. So we get into how do we project and monitor it, annually, monthly, and then detailed account by account if you need to get to that point. Hopefully you're not at that point, but if you need to, we can get into that. And then we break it into once again, the 3 to 4 numbers. So we got 3 levels of managing it. And then we like to break it into all the cash flow items into the four different categories. And we've got some worksheets that we go through so that we can get a handle on it. And this is just an example of what we go through, in one of the case studies. And you can see up here in January, this dealer budgeted to lose $50,000 on their P&L. That's what, if they hit target, their P&L would lose that, but they were going to consume $215,000 of cash. So that cash flow does not equal profit. You can have high profits and low cash flow. You can actually be losing money and have good cash flow for short periods of time. And so we get into that because it's so counterintuitive in many cases. One of the other components we get into is balance sheet. If I only get 2 numbers in your whole dealership, the first to monitor and manage it by, the first number we talked about was your gross profit dollars per employee. And your second number, which is one of the hidden drivers of your business, is going to be your debt to equity. And if your debt to equity gets too high, that turns you from a business manager to a cash flow manager. And when you're focused on just managing cash flow in a business, I will guarantee you're probably not in the top 20% because you're making decisions significantly different than if you've got a good balance sheet and some cash in the bank. Now, for years, this happens to be a slide that I pulled out of the RV industry on a presentation I made a few years back. Whether it's power sports, marine, farm equipment, truck, automotive, any big ticket. I mean, we've got 40 years of numbers, and whether it's good markets, bad markets, when we research the bottom 20% of profitability dealers, 80 to 90% plus, I'm not saying 100%, but 80 to 90% plus of them will be leveraged generally around 4.5 to 1 or greater. When we look at the high 20% profit dealers in all those different industries and big tickets, 80 to 90% of the time you'll find those dealers are leveraged at 2.5 to 1 or less with that. So good markets, bad markets, it just shows us time and time again. I've watched dealers that were high for years, worked in the top 20% high profit. They went out and bought another store, built a new facility or something, leveraged themselves up to 6 to 1, and all of a sudden they went from high profit to low profit. We see it time and again. In the ag industry, you can see this is actual data that we've pulled from hundreds of dealers. So you can see in the ag, it's even a little bit more conservative than we have than we see in the RV industry. Now, when we start thinking of your dealerships, those are just a high level of the different components, and we get into detail in each one of those. And how do we change it? How do we adjust it? What's the key levers? What are the key numbers? What do I need to change? And one of the things I want to reiterate too is when you go out of the workshop, you're not on your own. Part of the class is unlimited support to our 800 number. So if you bring your own financials while you're here, we've got lots of people that'll be glad to meet with you, as well as when you get outside of class, when you go home, you can burn up the phones and call. We've got 5 people that their full-time job is to just help people that are our 20 group members and that have gone through our workshops. So when you get home, we don't care if it's 5 days after you were here or 5 years after you were here. We'll take your call and answer your questions when you go home to implement. When you think of your own business, all businesses are in one of these 4 levels of development. In survive mode, stabilize, growth, or maximize. And sometimes I just came from a convention, national convention of dealers last week in Las Vegas. And a couple of the dealers asked me, well, John, I'm in survival mode, and I know one of my buddies who's up in this maximize. I mean, he's making a ton of money. He's thinking of going to that same workshop. Is that the right workshop for me? And the answer is yes, because what we talk about is these are 4 different gears and developmental levels of a business. And you can be in maximize one year and be in a tailspin in survival mode the next year if the market goes against you, or if we overexpand, or for many, many different reasons with that. So everybody's been in one of these gears at some point or another and is constantly switching between. So whether you're a dealer thinking, how do I maximize and I'm an 8% netter, how do I get to that 10 or 11% net? or whether your dealer's saying, where's payroll coming from on Tuesday, and am I going to make it through the winter and the slow cash flow months. We address those needs all the way through, because we address how do you act and react, and what are your top 2 or 3 items that you need to be working on in each one of these categories in the workshop. Just real quick, with that, Total Management 1 can give you strategic direction, confidence, clarity, peace of mind. These are all things that are direct quotes from many of the clients that have come through. And just to share real quick, here are some datas from in year one. At some point in year one, it may have been right at the end of the year, it may have been in the middle. It's usually somewhere between the middle to the end of the year. These are a couple of dealers, case study dealers, that came to the workshop, and you could see the dealer was actually losing money. Both of these were losing money in the year that they came. Take a look at year 2 and take a look at year 3. What's happened to their net profit as a percent of gross profit here? Had some significant changes, and a net profit as a percent of sales. So I know it works. We've got, if you ever want a reference for your industry and your dealer size, please let us know. We've got hundreds of references that we could get you names of several dealers if you'd like to call that are in your size as well. If you do decide to come, just a couple of things on logistics. Monday and Thursday is full day. Friday is a half day. We're done at 12:15 to 12:30 on the last day. And I recommend you don't cut out early that day, because the best stuff, how and where to start, is the end of the last day, is the last couple hours of how and where to start on your own business. You don't need to rent a car. We've got real reasonable, I think they're $92, $93 a night hotel rooms connected to restaurants, and all transportation is arranged, both from the airport to the hotel and from the hotel to our training facility. There's no charge with any of that. So a couple of key, and it also, if you do come, I would recommend that you send ahead your financials if you like, because we can give you a analysis like this. This was an actual dealer. I've wiped the name off of them, but you can see they were doing 9 million. I'm not even sure which industry this is, but they were doing 9 million, and they were losing $76,000. Their industry average in their same categories that they were in their dollar volume category, the industry average was making 2.9%. Now this was industry average. For those of you, if you want, we can also run the same report. There's no extra charge for this if you give us your data. We can run this with the top 20%. So if you're a dealer in survival mode like this dealer was, just trying to get to an average, we can give you the benchmarks here of actuals. If you're a dealer who's doing well and you want to see, okay, I want to be a top 20%er, we can plug that in. So either way, if you want, send us your data. It's not mandatory. You don't have to. But if you want, that's one of the things that would be no extra charge. I'm going to wrap up a couple slides, and then I'm going to have Pete see if there was, open up the chat to see if there was any questions. So key questions to ask yourself as we wrap up here. So what's it worth to be proactive versus reactive in your business? To be running the business instead of it running you? To be able to quickly and accurately set goals and budgets, even if you're a non-numbers person, and have a system that integrates all departments and gets the team going the same way instead of butting heads. Get a true handle on inventory and cash flow management. Have confidence and clarity on what needs to be done, and to have that 800 support number, knowing you can pick up the phone anytime you have a question. Like I said, whether it's the day after or 5 years after, pick up the phone and give a call, and to really have the foundational system that all can understand and work from. There's a couple of testimonials here from a couple of dealers who have participated and implemented Total Management 1. And as I said, we can get you live testimonials if you want to talk with anyone one-on-one. The cost is right here, and this is all online as well. and that does include the quick budget. You get a software tool along with it, subscription to a software tool that is included in the pricing. Our next dates and locations are here, and I do have just a couple of closing slides here, but I would, Pete, if you want to go ahead and put up the chat, and while Pete's doing that, I'll just let you know that we do have a special going on now. If you buy 3, you get 1 free. We got quite a few people that are taking advantage of that here this year. So you buy 3 seats to any workshop, and you get 1 free to any of the others. So it doesn't all have to be just Total Management 1. So I'd say go ahead. I've got one neat item to finish up with here, to hopefully a words of wisdom for you. Are there any questions? If anybody has any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. Okay, Pete, doesn't seem to be any questions. If we can just go back to the PowerPoint, and we'll go ahead and finish up. A couple words of wisdom that I'd like to leave you with is, this was something that I ran across, somebody gave to me a few years ago that I really like, and would challenge you all to ask yourself the questions that this asks. Good tired versus bad tired. My grandfather was a painter. He died at age 88. He illustrated Robert Frost's first 2 books of poetry. And he was looking at me and he said, Harry, there's 2 kinds of tired. There's good tired and there's bad tired. He said, ironically enough, bad tired can be a day that you won, but you won other people's battles. You lived other people's days and other people's agendas and other people's dreams. And when it's over, there was very little of you in there. And when you hit the hay at night, somehow you toss and turn. You don't settle easy. And I would share that in today's good markets, in a lot of the industries that are on the phone, ag is the only industry that's really struggling right now with the industries we're in. But we're seeing a lot of people that the financials may be doing okay, but they're a bad tired. They're winning other people's battles, not their own. Good tired, he said. Good tired, ironically enough, can be a day that you lost, but you won't even have to tell yourself, because you knew you fought your battles, you chased your dreams, you lived your days. And when you hit the hay at night, you settle easy, you sleep the sleep of the just, and you can say, take me away. He said, Harry, all my life I've wanted to be a painter, and I've painted. God, I would have loved to have been more successful, but I've painted and I've painted, and I am good tired, and they can take me away. I wish you all a great holidays, and I wish you all a good tired. And if you're struggling with your business and you're not winning the battles that you want, please let us help you, because we've helped hundreds of others do the same thing. With that, I thank you for your time today, and please know we got a whole team here dedicated to your greater success. And any